What's up, A to Z Sports here live on a Tuesday. It is officially NFL Combine Week. Sam Phelan and Easton Freeze are in Indianapolis, about an hour away from interviewing Titans head coach Brian Callahan and GM Mike Borgonzi. So on the show with me today is Ryan Roberts, our A to Z Sports film room analyst, Notre Dame writer, and overall NFL draft junkie. So we're going to have a great conversation today talking about quarterback evaluation and the trauma that comes with it, and how the Titans and the Titans fan base can deal with said trauma, whether it's from the recent trauma of Will Levis or maybe some not as recent trauma in Marcus Mariota. And so I'll kind of explain how those two things work together with today's show. Just Smash says, need more Ryan often. We're going to be on time with him. This is not a Ryan issue with being late. This is Sam and Easton making their way from the Airbnb to the convention center while also helping out with a thumbnail. So everything's all good. Going to have a great show this morning. We'll talk about Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, and the godfather of the NFL draft, Mel Kiper Jr., had an interesting comment indirectly about both and their situation with the Titans. And I thought I flagged this on Sunday night when I heard it. And I was like, okay, this is good. We can have a good show about this. So we'll talk about that. And then Ryan gets to have his Throwing Shade debut. So Ryan, welcome in. I hope you're ready for your first shade. You can get as angry as you want, and you can go as personal as you want, or it can be as like first world problems as you want it to be. So Ryan, welcome in, and happy NFL Combine Week.
Yes, sir. Yep. NFL draft, quarterback conversation. And obviously we're speaking a little bit of psychology, I think, a little bit into the show today, which is going to be an interesting conversation, right? But folks, only my second show here. But before we get going here, make sure a few things that you should be doing this morning. Don't forget to share the show. If you're watching with us on Facebook, hit that share button in the bottom right-hand corner and get it on your feed. If you're watching live on YouTube with us, where we have over 20,000 subscribers now and a bunch of people that are in the chat currently, take that YouTube link, send it to your friends. We want to make sure that it circulates to as many people as it can, group chats, text threads, wherever. Just find the Titans fans that you know and let them know that A to Z Sports is live and talking the future of the quarterback position for the organization. You can also repost on Twitter X if you're on there as well to help spread the word. Don't forget, hit that thumbs up button and leave a like on the show before we go here on a Tuesday morning.
Man, what a pro this Ryan Roberts guy.
Been doing it for years, man. Been doing it for years. Not to brag.
Let's get it going officially. Welcome into A to Z Sports here live on a Tuesday. I'm Austin Stanley. He is Ryan Roberts in today. A to Z Sports Film Room, also A to Z Sports Notre Dame at atozsports.com. And we'll get this thing off and rolling as we go live every weekday morning at 8 Central Time on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Links to the show segment by segment on our Twitter X timeline. Hit us up on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more great Titans content. Leave us a 5-star Google review because that helps out our company as a whole. And we got to thank our sponsors because they truly do make it happen for Nashville, and they help out you guys like Wilson County Hyundai. Make them a part of your new car buying process, Seaman Lebanon, or online wilsoncountyhyundai.com. The Bone and Joint Institute, boneandjointtn.org, the region's destination for comprehensive orthopedic and sports medicine care. T-Dot out there keeping our state beautiful, and you can join forces to find a solution to end littering by going to nobodytrashestennessee.com. And our friends at Bart Durham Injury Law, bartdurham.com. A crash can change your life forever, but help is just a click away at bartdurham.com. Speaking of Bart Durham Injury Law, all of our NFL Combine coverage this entire week is brought to you by Bart Durham Injury Law. So you'll hear from Sam and Easton later on this morning and the rest of this week from the NFL Combine. We're just about an hour away. Mike Borgonzi and Brian Callahan go back-to-back on the big podium there, as a lot of head coaches and GMs are talking today in Indianapolis. And then Instagram Reels, articles going out. Easton's working on his next interview series that will go out this week, and those guys will be on the show the rest of the way. And Ryan, you will be joining them in Indy tomorrow. So a little bit of a later start to your combine because your wife and one of your kids is on the way back from Disney. So yes. So there you go on that one. So Ryan, if you have not yet met Ryan, if you're in the chat, just introduce yourself real briefly. If you missed Friday's show, which was a great one, go back and watch it. Kind of tell people who you are and what your an interesting fact about yourself and the whole ice-breaking circle that we did in like middle school.
Okay. All right, let's do it. Yeah, I love being put on the spot like this again. Let's do it, man. A to Z Sports, obviously, if you guys are Notre Dame fans, which I doubt many people in this chat are, but you never do know. NFL draft fans, college football fans, NFL fans, obviously A to Z Sports is the place to be. You can follow me at Rise and Draft on Twitter. Like Austin said, I will be down in Indianapolis, heading down there actually tomorrow. So I'll be there Wednesday night through Sunday morning. This is actually, Austin, I believe, here's a weird, interesting fact, I guess. I think this is my 6th combine overall, I believe. I think so. So excited to get down there for A to Z Sports. And it's really funny because I've never actually met a single person other than Joe DeLeon who works for A to Z Sports in person before. So that's going to be fun times, obviously, getting down there and getting to meet the whole crew in person. My first time covering for the sites, and excited to get down there to Indianapolis.
Yep, it's gonna be a fun time. It's always fun for you guys to get in person as a full virtual company with you guys all across the country covering the NFL from afar. But gonna have a good show here. So let's dive right into it because Mel Kiper Jr. is the godfather of the NFL draft. I have a rule, Ryan, that there is no Mel Kiper Jr. slander allowed when I am discussing.
I'm glad we're on this show together because I have said the same thing for years. Literally, people will slander him on Twitter, and I always quote tweet it, and I say draft coverage would not be what it is today if it wasn't for Mel Kiper Jr. So while you might disagree with some of his takes, like we do with everybody's takes, just overall, you have to respect the man because literally we would not be having this topic today, most likely, if it wasn't for Mel Kiper Jr.
Yes, he created the industry that is a crazy content industry, a crazy season of content for NFL fans and college fans alike, all thanks to Mel Kiper Jr., who had the light bulb go on before anybody else. So Mel Kiper Jr. and Phil Yates are a part of ESPN's First Draft podcast. I listen to it, have for many years now during the draft season. And the conversation that Mel brought up this past week that I caught was, I thought, kind of perked my interest on how the Titans are dealing with the quarterback evaluation. So we'll start off. It's Mel Kiper talking about previous draft evaluations in years and trying to relate them to current quarterback evaluation in this group of Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, and how you can't really do, this happened in the past, so that's what's going to happen now. So here's a little excerpt from Mel Kiper Jr. on First Draft of ESPN.
Because this happened, this is going to happen. And in evaluations, that means absolutely nothing in terms of the evaluation process. But I think when you look at going back to Brady, when Brady was drafted, ties in with Shedeur. If you go back to my comments, when that pick was made.
The best.
The offensive line. Exactly what I said. You got to have an offensive line in place that can allow Tom Brady to do what he needs to do. He will surgically destroy you. Shedeur will surgically destroy you. Okay, talk about processing, accuracy, anticipation, awareness. Tom Brady, you see elements of that with Shedeur, but the offensive line, as you said, is going to be critical to whether Shedeur is a successful starting quarterback or he's not. Same thing we said about Tom Brady coming out. So in terms of tying one year to the next field, and I go back to you're always trying to learn from past mistakes. With quarterbacks, you really can't. You really can't. I tried to look back and say, well, because of this, could it have led to, and ultimately the quarterback was similar, turned out to be really good, to the quarterback was there's no rhyme or reason in some of this. Brian Billick came to me years ago, probably like 8-9 years ago. Brian was doing a book on quarterbacks.
Yeah.
What do you look for? That's this, and this, but ultimately it's a gut feel.
It's a gut feel ultimately. We'll come back to the second half of that in a second, but I want to focus on the beginning because Malachi says he just ruined Sanders' career because he mentioned Shedeur Sanders and Tom Brady, the same thing coming out. If you get them an O-line and let them surgically destroy you, they will do that, which we will pump the brakes. That was not a comp, not a Shedeur Sanders to Tom Brady comp. But Ryan, your thoughts on that aspect of Shedeur Sanders in a vacuum, talking about his processing, his timing and accuracy. How do you feel like that plays with some, of the quarterback evaluation? Where is Shedeur with that aspect of it?
Yeah, well, that whole excerpt about the Brady comparison did give me a little bit of flashbacks to when Kuiper said that if Jimmy Clausen didn't turn out, that he's going to quit the industry or whatever a long time ago. But
Yeah.
I agree with Mel in the instance of, and been fully transparent on this one, right? Is I think that the phrase system quarterback can be have a really negative connotation, but it legitimately means if you have support around you, if you're in a good system with a good structure, you have a quarterback that can do some really good things in that system, right? And I think that is Shedeur is the number one quarterback in this class if you just want that baseline for me, right? A guy that can throw on time, a guy that's going to hit 3-5-7 and get the ball out in a relatively good amount of time when he has a solid offensive line in front of him. I think that the negatives around Shedeur were highlighted more at Colorado because their offensive line was terrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially in 2023, they were not a good football team. So he had to play a little bit more of that hero ball role and have to do a little too much out of sight of structure a little bit. His best pathway to being a successful NFL quarterback, though, is to be in a system that asks him to be on time and be accurate. And so I do think he brings the highest floor to the table. Now, is that floor like Jared Goff-esque? Is it Kirk Cousins-esque? Like, I've comped him to Teddy Bridgewater. I know people think that's a shot, but go look at Teddy Bridgewater when he came out of Louisville in his early portion of his Minnesota career. If he never had that serious leg injury, I would argue that, yeah. And I would, and in practice, and I would argue that if that didn't happen, his career may have ended up way, way different. Not saying he would have been like a perennial MVP candidate, but like I think he would have been a pretty dang good quarterback in the NFL. And I think that's what Shedeur brings to the table, Austin, in my opinion, is that like if the structure is good around him, I trust him more than Cam Ward. But are you going to put him into a structure that is good for a quarterback? Like that's the question, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. And so this takes me back. So in part one of our two-part quarterback evaluation with the Titans trauma of their previous quarterbacks. So let's flash back 2015 draft. A young Austin Stanley and Zach Bingham were on local Nashville FM radio doing a morning show. The Titans had the second overall draft pick. And we were saying, all right, what do you want the Titans to do with the second overall draft pick? And I'm like, you know what? I think Leonard Williams out of USC is the right pick at 2 because I don't think they can protect and help Marcus Mariota. Well, whether you want to argue if that was the right pick or not, they go with Marcus Mariota at number 2. He goes through his rookie season. Ken Wisenhunt gets fired. Mariota gets a knee injury, like a strained knee injury because they could not protect him. Antonio Andrews famously just whiffing on pass protection from the running back spot and allowing a free shot to the knee of Mariota against the Patriots in December, and they shut him down. And then, look, Marcus has a really good second year, breaks his leg, freak injury, and then he couldn't stay healthy moving forward. So the result was they didn't support Mariota early enough, and the injuries created some trauma for Marcus and not playing confident once he got deeper into his career as the injuries stacked up. So that's part one of this trauma for Titans quarterback evaluations. So how does that apply to Shedeur Sanders? Because the Titans have had arguably one of the worst offensive lines collectively in the NFL for 3 years now. It was way better this past year than it was the previous 2 or 3, but they've been having turnstiles at left tackle. They had a turnstile of players at right tackle this past year. So do they have enough to protect and build for Shedeur Sanders? You're picking number 1 overall. So the answer is like whoever's picking number 1 overall or number 2 or 3, and we're about to talk about the Titans, Browns, and Giants, there are massive issues across all 3 of those rosters. And usually you don't pick in the top 5 if you have like a great offensive line. So now let's get to this. Let's just go ahead and ask this question here, Ryan, to get the people involved a little bit before we spoil too much of our potential answers. But as Mel Kiper just said, with Shedeur Sanders, if you have a offensive line for him to give him time, his process, his timing, his accuracy could, quote, surgically destroy you. Like what he said about Tom Brady coming out of Michigan 25 plus years ago. So which team of these 3 has the best structural fit for drafting Shedeur Sanders? The Titans, the Browns, or the Giants? Which of those 3 teams, picking 1, 2, and 3, has the best structural fit for drafting Shedeur Sanders? Titans, Browns, or Giants? I'm going to put up a YouTube poll here in a second because I'm curious about that data of how this breaks out. But real quick, I want to tell everybody about the Bone and Joint Institute. Just talked a lot about Marcus Mariota's injuries. Injuries happen in life just like they do in football, and you need the people you can trust and rely on when it comes to when you have that injury pop up. And that is the Bone and Joint Institute in Franklin, Tennessee, just off Highway 96 and I-65 right next to Williamson Medical Center. They are phenomenal. I've been there a few times over the last 4 or 5 years. It's been a shoulder old injury that I needed to get a little cortisone shot in there. Had to get a little help for some foot tendonitis, some knee tendonitis. They can help out right there whenever you need them. If it's a lot more serious than that and you need surgery, they have a state-of-the-art surgery center inside the clinic, inside the place, where they also have the rehab facility, all the resources under one roof. The Bone and Joint Institute in Franklin, right off of I-65 and Highway 96. When you need an appointment, book them online, boneandjointtn.org. Make sure you hit the like button, like the show. If you haven't yet, hit that like button. Ryan Roberts in here to kick off NFL Combine Week from A to Z Sports Film Room and A to Z Sports Notre Dame. So, Ryan, we asked the question. I'll send you to the chat. Which team has the best structural fit for drafting Shedeur Sanders, the Titans, Browns, or Giants? What are you seeing here from the audience?
Yeah, Titans, Browns, or Giants. We have IR Hoshi down here who says that he thinks the Browns are the best support for a younger quarterback, for Shedeur Sanders specifically. Darius Horton thinks it's the Tennessee Titans. We have Casey Jones who thinks that it is the Browns that are the best potential support for him. Eric Castillo, a couple guys with the Giants here. We also have Daniel who says Giants easily, he says. Cass, 66 with the Giants pick. We got Curtis with the Titans. We have Fortin Rico with New York because they have a true number one wide receiver. We have Stephen Bennett with the Giants. We have Rooney Glover with the Browns. We have the Giants. We have from David Brown. We have the Titans from Maven Cole. We have the Browns from Jeff Sawyer. We have the Giants from Scott Weaver. We have, I mean, it's a little bit split, honestly, Austin, now that I'm looking at it, right? I see a lot of Tennessee Titans. I see Lane Isringhagen, excuse me if I pronounced that wrong, with the Browns there. We have Bill Ray with the Giants. We have the Titans, another pick from the Jason Martinez because they have the first pick, which I think is an interesting conversation because you're spending that first pick on the quarterback. So it's not like you're drafting more support potentially for the quarterback, but it seems pretty split to me. Titans and Giants was the one that I heard the most, which I think is super interesting. The Browns weren't even too much in consideration. There was only like 1 or 2 for the Browns there. When I kind of look at it, I think it's really interesting on both sides because when I look at Tennessee, right, you have a second-year head coach, so you think he has a little bit of a longer leash than like what Brian Daboll has, obviously, with the New York Giants. I agree. The New York Giants do have a more legitimate number one option in Malik Neighbors, and they have a decent offensive line that is consistently improving. But I struggle to go with the Giants here, though, Austin, and I lean more towards the Titans because the Giants, you are a head coach and a GM bad season away from a completely new regime. And do you want to dump a quarterback into a 1-year fix and then have to reset the entirety of the franchise? I lean Titans because I think that we have a little bit more of a runway here of potentially building up a good product around them.
Okay, that's interesting because, you know, the Mel Kiper clip was mostly about the offensive line, right? It's like if you have the O-line, but then the Giants, Malik Neighbors a stud. I think the Browns, like the Browns are so tricky because, like, do you think the Browns are in the quarterback market, like, for real? Like, do you think the Browns are Bill Carter, Travis Hunter, or will they draft the quarterback? Your gut feeling on February 25th of what that situation is with Deshaun Watson's contract.
So when the offseason first started, I was fully on the bandwagon of I think the Browns will not be in the quarterback market because it's just what I was kind of hearing on that side a little bit. And it sounded like they understand they have holes, right? You have a need left tackle, for instance. You have a couple defensive back contracts that are going to be here up in the near future. You need wide receivers. You need a running back now that Nick Chubb, obviously, in his future. So I think the Browns are a couple years away from maybe even being a couple years away, which is interesting, right? We always talk about, like, do you want to drop a quarterback into this situation? Well, when you have a longer runway of like being a good product, by the time he potentially rebuild that roster, then you're going into a quarterback's second contract, and that hamstrings a little bit of the rebuilding process just continually, right?
Yeah.
So I at first I thought they were just going to take best player available, maybe trade back, but either way, pass rush, maybe a Mason Graham, like the D tackle out of Michigan, something like that. But the more time has passed, I've heard a lot of Shedeur Sanders buzz, actually. And I do think that if Shedeur is available to Cleveland at number 2, they would think long and hard of that, because it feels like he's a guy that Kevin Stefanski and that front office feels like can fit their system. And it is an important fit into kind of that West Coast play action, heavy run oriented approach. I think that they might think that Sanders is a key fit to them potentially.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to go with the Browns for my answer on this.
That's a hot take. I want to hear why. That's a little bit of a hot take. I like it.
I believe of the 3 teams we're talking about, of Titans, Browns, and Giants, the Browns are the only ones that had before last season, like, oh, Browns could fight for a playoff spot, right? Because of Deshaun Watson's contract, they had weapons, they have good defensive players. Their offensive line is the best of the 3 teams. I think the Browns O-line is better than the Titans, is better than the Giants. And so I think when I'm looking now, they trade away Amari Cooper. They have Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore. They've got some decent weapons. Jerry Jeudy, 1,200 yards, after he was acquired last season. Now, like 500 of those yards came in one game. But I think the Browns, because of having Deshaun Watson on the roster, even though he tore his Achilles a second time, which went super under the radar back around the holidays, I think Shedeur Sanders with Stefanski, who is a proven head coach with a better offensive line, and Jerry Jeudy and, a couple of these other wide receiver tight end groups, I feel like the Browns are best fit for, if I'm Shedeur Sanders, I can have more on-field success early in Cleveland than I could with the Giants or the Titans.
It's an interesting conversation around fitting into a system and fitting in with a coach, right? Because if you just isolate, I think Brian Daboll is a pretty good offensive mind, but I mean, again, he's on a very short leash entering 2025 with just the season that the Giants had. But when you stack up Brian Daboll versus Kevin Stefanski versus Coach Callahan, it's a really interesting conversation, because I think if you just dump a quarterback into the system tomorrow, I do feel most positive or most reassured that Stefanski will probably get the most out of a quarterback, at least early on in his career, right? I think the weird thing about the Browns, though, like I said, is that, I mean, Myles Garrett wants out now, which is obviously a franchise-altering piece for them. They need a new left tackle. There are just a couple holes that make me a little bit unsettled with how I just view their upside as a organization moving forward. But I think either way, like, it fun. Here's a take, and I would love to hear if you agree with this. The Giants, for me, if they had, like, let's say they would have brought in a new coaching staff this offseason, or a coaching staff that had a longer leash, I think I would pick them without hesitation, without even slight hesitation. Because I would have looked at it and said, you have Malik Neighbors. Tyrone Tracy did a lot of good things at running back as a rookie last year. You have pieces on the offensive line, as long as Andrew Thomas could stay healthy at left tackle. He's a very good player. You have some pieces offensively where I say, like, okay, that could do some nice work. But I think the thing that makes me hesitate on the Giants again is Brian Daboll going to be around in 2026? Is Joe Shane going to be around in 2026? That's why I think Titans vaulted them a little bit for me. But if there was more coach stability, I think I would go Giants pretty comfortably in this conversation.
Okay. I think my rankings, if I were to go 1 through 3 on these, I would say Browns are the best structural fit to draft Shedeur Sanders now. Titans second, Giants third. Because I agree with you on the uncertainty at head coach and GM there. Some people, once you said that the first time, Ryan, some people in the chat was like, well, Callahan could be on the hot seat too. Like that's an assumption from the fan base. And so Daniel says, we're talking about the team, not coaching. No, we're talking about structure. Yeah. Structure is everything. Structure is the cap space surrounding the roster, the head coaches, the coaching staff, the coordinator, everything about these franchises to best fit Shedeur Sanders. because of what Mel Kiper said earlier. And I'll play the clip again about the Shedeur Sanders aspect from ESPN's first draft from Mel Kiper. Here's the conversation we're having today.
Because this happened, this is going to happen. And in evaluations, that means absolutely nothing in terms of the evaluation process. But I think when you look at going back to Brady, when Brady was drafted, it ties in with Shedeur. If you go back to my comments, when that pick was made,
the best.
The offensive line. Exactly what I said. You got to have an offensive line in place that can allow Tom Brady to do what he needs to do. He will surgically destroy you. Shedeur will surgically destroy you. Okay, talk about processing, accuracy, anticipation, awareness. Tom Brady, you see elements of that with Shedeur, but the offensive line, as you said, is going to be critical to whether Shedeur.
So the offensive line critical, processing, accuracy, composure, awareness, timing, all of these things that Shedeur Sanders does well. So with you answered the Titans. You think the Titans are the best structural fit of the teams picking in the top three, right? Titans, Browns, Giants. All three teams have a bunch of problems. So with the Titans O-line, want to focus on that one because we haven't really done that yet.
Right.
J.C. Latham, solid rookie season, ups and downs as a rookie left tackle, making the switch from right tackle to be expected. But overall, a passable rookie season for sure. Peter Skoronski, left guard, second year, sneaky pretty good. Healthy, coming off the appendectomy. Lloyd Cushenberry was solid, tore his Achilles. Center was a problem after that, and everything else kind of went downhill once he was out. Right guard is unoccupied. Right tackle is absolutely unoccupied. Dylan Radin's a free agent, played a lot of right guard, played okay at times, solid at times. He could be brought back. Right tackle was wide the hell open. So I think I feel good about center to left tackle moving forward as long as Cushenberry comes back from the Achilles okay, which he should. He's mid-20s. He should be able to recover from that. And it was early enough in the season where he shouldn't miss too much time to start training camp. But how do you feel about the Titans O-line situation when talking about can Shedeur Sanders succeed and survive behind an O-line? They got Will Levis sacked a bunch.
I think whether the Titans fill right guard in free agency or in the draft at some point, I feel okay about figuring out right guard. Right tackle is the tipping point to this conversation for me, though, because it's not easy to find good offensive tackles. It just isn't, especially if we are investing our first overall selection, our first round selection into a quarterback. Is there a right tackle in free agency that is a player that you deem to be a really good football player? Is there someone that you can get in potentially in on day 2 of the 2025 NFL draft that can come in and help to solidify this offensive line? I agree with you. Center to left tackle, you feel pretty good. I feel okay about finding right guard. The right tackle position is the biggest one for me. And I think the tipping point to how good this offensive line can be in 2025, because I do think the one cool thing is obviously Coach Callahan knows offensive line play, right? That's a big selling point to him as a coach just in general, right? So as long as, and I think this goes back to the overall vision. Do you trust not only Coach Callahan, but Mike Borgonzi, right? Is he a guy that can come in and rebuild that right side? Because if you can make it stable, I do think there's a lot of validity to what Mel Kiper is talking about here. If the offensive line is suitable or steady enough that Shedeur could be a nice fit in there. I really think it comes down to right tackle, Austin. How are you filling that spot? How are you supplementing? How are you figuring out? Because obviously you're not going to go back to a Nicholas Petit-Frere situation. That's a disaster. You need to figure out someone much better, much more competent than that situation. I think it comes down to right tackle, but I do like the building blocks that are up front in certain spots. That right side is obviously a very important conversation for the rest of this offseason when free agency opens up.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a question that we did not talk through in the pre-show convo about quarterbacks, and I want to see if you can confirm or if you're not going to buy the statement. Greg Cosell of NFL Films tells this to Buck Rising all the time. If you get sacked a lot in college, you're going to get sacked a lot in the NFL. Hold your thoughts on that, because I want to know the answer to that. Here in a second, but first, do want to tell everybody about our friends at TDOT, the Tennessee Department of Transportation. they got a lot of work on their plates because Tennessee is a very long, broad, wide state with a lot of mileage, and TDOT's covering all those highways and interstates to make sure that we can fix the potholes and address the other situations, but also the litter problem, because littering is an issue across our state. So we can all jump in to help out to find the solution to end littering across Tennessee by visiting nobodytrashestennessee.com. There's over 80 million pieces of litter on Tennessee's highways and interstates. We can all jump in to help out because TDOT spends $20 million every year to try to clean it up, yet it's still a problem. We all have bad habits we can fix. Littering may be one of them for you. NobodyTrashesTennessee.com is a way to help out, break those bad habits, maybe either accidental bad habits, but it's there for you for your resources. Maybe your son or daughter needs some volunteer experience and work. NobodyTrashesTennessee.com. Also, while you're at it, subscribe to the YouTube channel because we're almost at 20.1K, almost there on the YouTube channel. So we're trying to get to 25K. We'll see if we can do that where we're at by draft season, but we need you guys to subscribe to the channel. So Ryan, I asked you the question. Greg Cosell says this. If you get sacked a lot in college, you're going to get sacked a lot in the NFL. Shedeur Sanders got sacked a lot at Colorado. Do you buy that as a whole? And does it apply to Shedeur Sanders? If you get sacked in college, you're going to get sacked in the NFL.
I mostly agree fully with it. But I do think that when we make those definitive statements, you do lose context in certain situations, right? So is that generally a good take? I think I agree with Mr. Cosell. I think that is a generally good take. But when we talk about Shedeur, I do think a couple things to consider as far as breaking that bad habit. One, he played with one of the worst offensive lines in FBS football the last 2 years. I think we really underestimated the fact that they won like 9 games this year with the offensive line they had was pretty remarkable, to be honest. And we underrated the fact when Coach Deion Sanders came in, he said, I'm going to the portal for offensive linemen. Sounds good in theory, but the best colleges develop offensive lines from the high school route and develop over time. That is a position that needs technical refinements, communication, all those things. So I think when we're talking about Sanders' offensive line the last 2 years at Colorado, although it was better this year than it was in 2023, it was still not a good offensive line, just flat out. And there were a lot of plays where, like Austin, for me, it's like a quarterback stat of taking sacks. It is when you hold the ball way too long. But there were some plays where I'm like, he's hitting his third step in his drop and he's getting smashed in the mouth. And it's like, that's not a quarterback issue on that particular play. That's an offensive line issue, right? So I think the offensive line was bad. And I think I talked about this. And the reason that I think it cut down from 2023 to 2024 was because 2023, they were a bad football team. And honestly, Shedeur was trying to do way too much in 2023. He was trying to be the hero. He was trying to be Superman all the time. I do think that, because we'll talk about Cam Ward later, obviously, but Cam Ward has a similar problem. But which one is fixable? I think Shedeur is more fixable in that regard because I do think he plays better on time. I do think he plays with a little bit more general understanding of when to get the football out. And I think that he does read a little bit quicker. So if we can now get a better offensive line in front of him and not get that little bit of hero ball out of you a little bit, right? Let's reel that back a little bit. I do think that it's fixable in Shedeur's case. How much though is a very debatable question. So I generally agree, long-winded saying, but I do think that Shedeur is one that I do think can be semi-fixed in this regard.
I think I agree too. And I think I also look at the Titans offensive line and how many sacks the Titans O-line allowed. The Titans O-line as a whole allowed 52 sacks this season. It's a lot, but how about the split between Levis and Rudolph, Ryan? Will Levis played in 12 games. He was sacked 41 times. Mason Rudolph played in 8 games. He was sacked 11 times. Like, that's not that. But, okay, now let's go into how many pass attempts the two have. Levis had 301 pass attempts, where Rudolph had 228 pass attempts. Like, that's not enough differential of the pass attempts as there is in 30 more sacks that Levis took over those times. So, and Brian Callahan talked about it. All the Titans coaches talked about it. Levis talked about it, and getting himself sacked. That was a quarterback issue, a quarterback getting himself sacked, where Mason Rudolph was able to play better within that protection and made the O-line look better. I think Shedeur Sanders is more fixable on that side of things.
Yeah.
Was that kind of the same? Was Will Levis like that coming out of? I didn't like him coming out of Kentucky. That's no secret to anybody watching the show. But was he somebody that had those issues in college too?
He did, and he played behind actually an okay offensive line in Kentucky. It wasn't terrible, but I do remember, and I need to go back and look what the exact sack number was, because Kentucky wasn't like a heavy throw team. Like, they did run the ball a lot with like Chris Rodriguez when he was in college a good bit, but he was a guy that, generally speaking, was a little bit of a slow processor and took some unnecessary sacks. Absolutely. So yeah, I think that he definitely had that habit. Again, we just need to compartmentalize what is fixable and what isn't fixable, right? Like, I think that's the biggest thing here. I do think it's semi-fixable with Shedeur, which is promising, obviously, for an offensive line that is getting steadily rebuilt.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's hear the second half of the Mel Kiper comment. I've isolated that because this was the part 2 of our quarterback trauma for the Titans. And I thought this one, honestly, might be even more interesting than the first aspect of it. So let's go back to Mel Kiper talking about previous quarterback evaluation mistakes and how they apply to the current.
So in terms of tying one year to the next field, and I go back to all the, you're always trying to learn from past mistakes. With quarterbacks, you really can't. You really can't. I tried to look back and say, well, because of this, could it have led to, and ultimately the quarterback was similar, turned out to be really good, to the quarterback was this. There's no rhyme or reason in some of this. Brian Billick came to me years ago. Years ago, probably like 8-9 years ago, Brian was doing a book on quarterbacks.
Yeah.
What do you look for? That's this, and this, but ultimately it's a gut feel.
So I thought when I heard that, and that was directly after Kiper talked about Tom Brady and Shedeur Sanders, if they have time, if they have the O-line, can surgically destroy you. Then Kiper says that.
Yep.
You have to learn from your mistakes, but just because two guys are similar, the first guy burned you doesn't mean the second guy is going to burn you with similar traits. And when I heard that the first time, I go, oh, Will Levis and Cam Ward.
Yeah.
That is what I was like, okay, now we've got something here. And so I'm going to ask this question to everybody to see. This is going to be interesting. Has Will Levis's play style scarred you enough to turn you off of Cam Ward for the Titans? Has Will Levis scarred you enough to turn you off of Cam Ward? So that's a yes or no. I think it's fascinating to know the answer to this. Yes or no, because of what Mel Kiper just said. Real quick, let's tell everybody about our great friends, Bart Durham Injury Law. They are sponsoring all of our great NFL Combine coverage for the entire week. Sam Thalen, Easton Freeze are currently in Indy. They'll have some great, fresh Titans content coming up in about 30 minutes or so with Brian Callahan and Mike Borgonzi speaking. And all of our content is presented by our friends at Bart Durham Injury Law, where a crash can change your life forever, but help is just a click away at bartdurham.com. Your big truck wreck or any car accident is Bart Durham Injury Law's fight for justice. And they have attorneys that are always available to talk with you at any time of the day, 24/7, a live chat feature at bartdurham.com. You could also call them. You could also go to their website and find out how you can set up an appointment, a virtual appointment for your convenience, or if you want to talk in person, they've got you covered right there in their Capitol View office location in Nashville that I've been to a couple times. Super sweet, super nice, easy parking, which is a big deal in downtown Nashville. Ryan, if you didn't know that, downtown Nashville parking is a nightmare, but not at Bart Durham Injury Law's offices in Capitol View. So you can check them out there. They've been serving Tennesseans and Nashvillians alike since 1975. And Blair Durham, Bart's son, is running the show, is a great Nashvillian, doing a lot of things behind the scenes. So check them out online at bartdurham.com. Last call of action for you guys here, outside of answering this question, is to 5-star Google review. Leave that 5-star Google review for A to Z Sports. That helps us out quite a bit. Ryan, I'll send you the chat.
Yep.
Has Will Levis's play style scarred you enough to turn you off of Cam Ward for the Titans? So it's yes or no's, but I'm curious to see what people are going to say to this one.
And Burning Devil 2010 start us off with a big no, all capitals there. We have LAC who says yes. We have Reforming the Outdoors, who says no. Caps says yes. Curtis says nah, just no more Will Levis. Very fair. Our Hoshi says no. We have a heck no from Esco. We have Darius in the chat who says a little Eileen, yes. Daniel says no. Chill Maid says no, no, no. They are not the same at all. We have Tall Texan who says no. Ward's play has scarred us. Malachi Perry says yes. Titans Kyle says yes. Stevie BOE says no. We have Eric Castillo who says no. Bama Brad who says yes. We have Kenneth Davidson who says no. Scott Weaver with a no. We have Tyler in the chat with a yes with a whole lot of exclamation points. So he has unfortunately scarred him a little bit, it seems. Robert Mason with a no. We have no. Cam Ward isn't Will Levis from Stephen Crochet. We have Demario with a no. Al with a yes. Austin, it really seems very split in the chat on, which is interesting in the sense of, do you really dislike Cam Ward if it's a yes, or you just dislike the thoughts of a style similar to Will Levis, right? That is the interesting conversation for me, right?
So I want to play the Mel Kiper clip again, and then I'm going to give you my answer, and I'll let you react to it, and then I want to hear what you thought. I also put up a YouTube poll too for the yes or no, so we can find that out. Because by the way, like 47% said Titans were the best fit structurally for Shedeur Sanders on our first poll. So we'll find out the results of this one for Cam Ward. But here was Kiper again on the on this discussion.
So in terms of tying 1 year to the next field, and I go back to all that's always trying. You're always trying to learn from past mistakes. With quarterbacks, you really can't. You really can't. You really, there's no, I tried to look back and say, well, because of this, could it have led to, and ultimately the quarterback was similar, turned out to be really good, to the quarterback was this. There's no rhyme or reason in some of this. Brian Billick came to me years ago. I mean, years ago, probably like 8-9 years ago. Brian was doing a book on quarterbacks.
Yeah.
What do you look for? That's this, and this, but ultimately it's a gut feel.
So I do agree that Kiper's right, that there's so much gut feel about quarterbacks, because I am sick and tired, Ryan, of traits. Anthony Richardson has the most traits, the best RAS score, the best combine performance in combine history. Who gives a damn? Because Anthony Richardson wasn't a good college quarterback. And so Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward were both objectively good college quarterbacks. Did they win a conference title? No. Did they win at a super high level? No, but they did alter and change programs for the better in short amount of time. So they do get that credit and how they work there. But so on this of, do I have enough Will Levis PTSD watching the Tennessee Titans over the last 2 years to scar me to stay away from Cam Ward? If I have to be in a yes or no box, I am going to go in the yes box on this, because I also think it matters of, how does this coaching staff feel? Because this coaching staff did not draft Will Levis, but they came here because they thought they saw enough that Will Levis could be the guy for them. But they've already burned one quarterback, whether it's his fault or the coaching staff's fault. That is the case. I don't think they can really afford to miss again. So does Brian Callahan and his offensive coaching staff say, well, this guy's got some Will Levis traits in him and some Will Levis tendencies in him to play reckless. Can we, as a coaching staff, afford to do this again? Because like that is like, if you're Brian Callahan and you just went 3-14 on your head coaching record to start off your head coaching record, like if you're going to get above 500 as an NFL head coach, you got a lot of work to do. Right?
Sure.
And Will Levis is the main reason why you're 3-14, in my opinion. You're like, all right, let's go get the guy who's better than Will Levis, but still has some of the same problems that'll make me have gray hairs. That's where I say yes. The PTSD might just be strong enough.
I think Vanessa said a very interesting question in the chat. She said, is it PTSD or common sense? Right? Because I think that when we're evaluating quarterbacks, this isn't a Will Levis thing as much. Will Levis is a part of this conversation, but we have seen the volatile gunslingers who hold the ball a little bit too long, they have had some bad failures in the NFL at times, right? And could it be just common sense of that style maybe doesn't work all the time in the NFL? The problem is that it does work sometimes, right? And you can coach it out sometimes. I do think it really is an interesting conversation of, because Coach Callahan's all that matters in this conversation, right? Is he tired of it? Is he gun shy from it because he just had to have a year with Will Levis that did not work out at all for this Tennessee franchise? That's an interesting conversation for me. But I would also say it has not turned me off personally because of the simple fact, and we talked about this on Friday with Sam, we have to separate the two. Will Levis wasn't just a volatile up and down guy coming out of Kentucky. He was a second guy that fell to the second round for an obvious reason and wasn't overly productive at Kentucky. Like, he wasn't very good at Kentucky. I think his final stat line was like 44 touchdowns, like 23 interceptions or something like that in 2 years. Like, he was not very good. He just wasn't. Very average in the SEC. Cam Ward, just this past year, not apples to apples because they're in different conferences and different opponents, but he threw 39 touchdowns to 7 interceptions this past year. Like, the production is nowhere in the same ballpark, in the same stratosphere. Cam Ward is just, generally speaking, a better prospect than what Will Levis is. And I really do think, I don't know if you've talked about this on the show before, but we fall into helmet scouting a lot. And this is a similar conversation, right? Ohio State, for several years, it's like, all Ohio State quarterbacks stink. And then maybe Carolina should have drafted CJ Stroud #1 overall instead of Bryce Young. But hey, all Ohio State quarterbacks stink, right? I think that we just, generally speaking, need to evaluate this in a vacuum. This is a one player. If Coach Callahan, Mike Borgonzi sit down with Cam Ward, grind the film, and they say, I'm comfortable with that kid, I can coach out some of the flaws and I can accentuate the strengths, I think that is ultimately what matters. So as a fan base, it might be unsettling to you and just anybody out there that said, like, yes, I don't want this style of quarterback. And I get it because it is a little bit volatile, but I always turn it back to, but he isn't the same, right?
Yeah.
He isn't the same player. This is a different player. This is a different evaluation. So for me, I'm a no. This does not steer me away from Cam Ward because I think he's just generally a much better player and a much better prospect.
Yeah, and that's fair. 74% say no. So I'm in the 26% grouping of the yeses. And I think it's because I am viewing this of what I know Brian Callahan wants in a quarterback. And it is somebody who plays within structure, who plays on time, who understands how to read a defense within the timing that you have to read a defense. And Cam Ward probably could do that, right? Like, I'm not saying that I don't think Cam Ward can go through progressions and play on time. It's just what his, like you called it, the magic on Friday. The magic is the fact that he can improvise and do some cool stuff, but you get away with that when you're playing against an ACC schedule or when you're like, you're coming from behind in Berkeley against Cal at 1 a.m., right? And like, the other thing too, like you can say this about both Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, is that their wins came against teams they were supposed to beat for the most part. There's a couple games where, like, okay, Colorado 2 years ago beat TCU set week 2. You're like, oh, damn, that's crazy. They just went to the title game. TCU sucked. The result came out later that TCU was not bad or was not good, and Colorado was bad too. So Miami had a lot on the line, lost at Georgia Tech, lost to Syracuse. They had everything in front of them, including my futures bet to make the playoff, and they lost it. They fumbled it away, literally. And so I think that's where you didn't really have that moment of these guys winning the big game for their organizations. Right. Not all their fault, but it is something that I'm looking at. And I feel like I just feel like Brian Callahan doesn't want to risk his career as a head coach on a guy who is more similar to Will Levis than the other guy.
That's very fair. Let me ask you a question if this changes your perspective on that a little bit in terms of Cam Ward. So the one thing about Will Levis that was unsettling was he was better his second to last year at Kentucky than he was his last year, right? Like you saw him level out and you're like, that's not progression, right? Like that's not consistently getting better. The one thing that gives me optimism about Cam continuing to get better is he literally did every single year, right? He started out at Incarnate Word. Year 1 to year 2 was better. He went to Washington State. Year 1 was very up and down. Year 2 was better. And then his final year was by far his best year. So he has consistently just kind of leveled up throughout the course of his career. Does that change your perspective at all? Because I think that the scary part about this type of quarterback is that when he hits his plateau and you're like, I don't know if he's ever going to hit that next level because he doesn't have that anticipation. He doesn't have those intangibles, quote unquote, that we always talk about. I think Cam has shown that he's been consistently just getting better, which gives me optimism for the future.
That's a good point. And I believe in that. And if you are the Will Levis side of things and you're the pro Will Levis guy in the draft process, which I was not, but that camp was saying he was really hurt that last year at Kentucky and he was playing through the injury, right? That was the response to your question of, well, we don't know because, he lost receivers at the draft. Liam Cohen went to the NFL. He had a foot injury. He couldn't move. But he fought through for his team so Kentucky could make a bowl game. Like that was the pro Will Levis thing. I did not buy it at all. I did not buy that Will Levis was great his junior year at Kentucky. And he just wasn't. And he was the same traits guy that we saw with the Anthony Richardson hype. So to go back to the Titans on this, somebody called me out and said that I'm flip-flopping. I'm paraphrasing because Friday I said that if the Titans are picking number 1 overall, I would pick Cam Ward over Shedeur Sanders. If they were picking quarterback at number 1, I would still go Cam Ward over Shedeur because I think Cam Ward has a higher ceiling and you need to pick the higher ceiling as a number 1 overall pick. But I still feel as of right now, the Titans should try to trade back because in my opinion, a quarterback at number 1 or one of these two quarterbacks at number 1 is not a high enough level prospect to change and alter the trajectory of the Titans organization. They still need more, and these prospects are not as high level as the previous guys coming out to say, screw it, you can't miss on this. So I just don't view these guys as can't miss.
And I think that's a very fair perspective because people talk about like passing on. So here's the big cliche that I hate. I know we're not talking about things that we hate yet, but like I hate this, right? I'm not. We'll get there, but I'm throwing a little bit of shade right this second at the thought we're balking to 2026. We're going all in on the 2026 quarterback class. That's not what you're saying, and that's not what we're even saying in general. What the conversation needs to be is quarterback A or B, whether it's Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, are they a better player for you long-term in the sense of passing up on a guy that is a blue chipper, like an Abdul Carter, like there's a couple guys in this class that I would even put that blue chip label on. I think Mason Graham out of Michigan's a blue chip. Now you're not going to, and Travis Hunter is a blue chip. Now you're not going to take Mason Graham at number 1, right? But trading back that conversation that we will continue to have on this show leading up into the draft until we have a designation of what exactly Tennessee is going to do, is Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders so good that you pass up maybe getting more draft capital, and then let's say it's with the New York Giants at 3, if you trade back to 3, well, you might be able to recoup a bunch of draft picks and still get Abdul Carter or Mason Graham. It's very possible that those things, or Travis Hunter, that one of those things are on the table. So that I think is your perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, that those players are just more attractive than maybe drafting one of these quarterbacks who you just don't maybe fully believe in at this point.
Yes. And the fact that the Titans have a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and then they don't pick again until 102. It's a big gap. That's a big gap of picks where you have a lot of problems. And I know one thing Sam is going to ask Borgonzi today when he speaks with him about 30 minutes at the combine is you've got 4 big needs. And this is a future show, I'm sure, for this week, depending on how Borgonzi answers it. Quarterback, wide receiver, offensive line, edge rusher. Those are 4 pretty big positions, right? And the Titans need all 4. They need really good players at all 4 spots. They only got 2 picks in the top 100. Like once you get to 102 in the 4th round, you're rolling the dice. You know, you might hit, but odds are probably not.
Yeah.
You know, a day 1 contributor. How do you balance? Like, what do you go in free agency first versus what do you do with number 1 and 35 if that's all you've got? So I'm curious to see what Borgonzi is going to do, because you got to get better at all 4 spots, and it's going to be either expensive in free agency or expensive with draft capital.
Well, and it's dangerous in this class from that vantage point, because we talked about quarterback. This is really a 2-man quarterback class, and then it's a little bit of a big tier break to those second tier guys that are probably going to go more in the day 2 range. But after that, you mentioned offensive tackle. It's not a great offensive tackle class overall from an NFL draft perspective. Edge is really deep, but you mentioned it, without a ton of top 100 draft capital, a lot of those guys are going to be gone, right? Like they're going to go off the board because that is a premium position. And then wide receiver, it's a pretty average class as well. So you need to make the right decision here at number 1. And that's why I think trading back actually is probably the best scenario for Tennessee, because with those premium position needs, if you don't hit them all in free agency, this board might fall very negatively to Tennessee, depending on what happens in that number 2 overall pick to next pick for the Tennessee Titans. And I just think that there's going to be a run on the edges. I think it's not a great wide receiver class. It's not a great offensive tackle class. And that's not a great place to be if you're the Titans.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Big Bad John says, sadly, if the Titans trade back to 3, the Browns are going to draft Carter right in front of your faces. Is that a bad thing? Because that could happen. Or Abdul Carter is going to be there because the Browns take the 2nd quarterback, and if the Giants take the 1st, then you get Abdul Carter at 3 plus whatever you got there. Then, if you are at 3 on the board and Abdul Carter goes number 2, then you have the number 1 overall pick again with the top quarterback still available, and you can trade back another time, and you can pin the Raiders and the Jets against each other, maybe even the Saints, and say, hey, here's the number 1. You just reset the draft 2 picks later.
Here's an interesting question that I was actually asked. I do a weekly NFL draft mailbag over at A to Z Sports. And one thing I was asked, Austin, which is very interesting as well. We're all just assuming that if a trade up happens, it's for a quarterback. Well, what if it's for a non-quarterback? What if someone wants to trade up to get Travis Hunter? What if they want to trade him and get Mason Graham? You could potentially move back and still get your quarterback at 3. It's very, very possible. Now quarterbacks generally are the ones that make the trade ups happen, but in a class that lacks blue chip talents, would it be crazy for a team to trade up to 1 to get Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter that they perceive to be the elite prospects in this class?
Patriots.
Yeah.
Mike Vrabel.
Yeah.
Do you know off the top of your head when the last time somebody did trade up to number 1 to get a non-quarterback?
This sounds like a great article that I could write about this.
Okay,
I think this would be an interesting one. Yes.
Then we'll do that. Oh man, because that is interesting. I mean, because the Texans just a couple of years ago traded up to 3 to get Will Anderson after they took CJ Stroud, but 3 ain't 1. Right. All right.
I mean, like the first one that popped in my head was like Mario Williams, but like that was a long time ago, right? Like,
and that was
Mario, didn't they?
No, that was the Texans' number 1 pick, because the Texans were sitting there at 1. Did they want Houston's own Vince Young at number 1, or did they want Mario Williams at number 1? And then the Titans got Houston's own and Bud Adams' favorite Vince Young at number 3, right there. So that's where that went. Back in 2006. That's a good point. All right, Ryan, let's get to some throwing shade for the first time. Ryan's going to throw some shade. I've got a super chat that is a super chat and a comment from earlier in the show that has to deal with some shade today in the sports world with these draft conversations. Time to throw some shade. If you have shade, throw it in the chat. We'll read it too. Here we go. Shout out to Wilson County Hyundai, WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Make them a part of your new car buying process. See them in Lebanon online, WilsonCountyHyundai.com for that. Also, once again, special shout out to our friends at Bart Durham Injury Law. NFL Combine content galore on the way for the rest of the week, presented by our friends at Bart Durham Injury Law. So shout out to them. Sam and Easton are getting ready to talk to Brian Callahan first at 9:15 Central. So like 5 minutes from now, and then Mike Borgonzi right after that. So time to throw some shade. I will start the shade off by Brian Malone's super chat. That was a big one.
Yeah.
And he says, with some of the top names not participating in drills, it makes me question why some athletes accept the invitation. Seems to me like if you accept the invitation, you should be obligated to participate.
It's fair.
Yeah, it's fair to ask. I think it's no is the answer. Because Abdul Carter is also not participating because Abdul Carter hurt his shoulder in the college football playoff, which is basically less than 2 months ago when that game happened. And so Abdul Carter is not going to go out there and do drills with a not fully recovered or full strength shoulder. Because when you get hurt, you got to get healed, then you got to get stronger again. And so, no, Abdul Carter shouldn't do that. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of reasons why someone does or doesn't work out.
Well, and I would say this is that we need to define participating, right?
Yeah.
Because while we as fans and as media love to just watch these guys run these crazy 40 times and these crazy verticals and broads and these athletic feats and these marvels, that's more for the media and for the fans, right? Because this is not the only time that a franchise is going to be able to see these guys run around. We have pro days, we have those individual workouts, you have other opportunities to see them athletically in person, but this is more about, and this is an NFL side of things, I want to sit down and talk to these guys. I want to see the medicals. Those are the things that are a little bit more important, especially because we have GPS data now for in-game athleticism that a lot of teams now subscribe to. So they want to talk to these players. They want to be able to do the medicals, that type of stuff. That actually matters more to the NFL teams than seeing them run around and do their athletic feats that we find so fascinating.
Yeah. So that wasn't my official shade, but I thought that fit more of the throwing shade segment. Here's my official shade. Because Casey Jones had this comment earlier in the show. These Sanders comps are insane. Sam compared him to Rodgers yesterday. Talk about two QBs that couldn't be any more different. But hey, I get Shedeur gives you guys the most material to write about. So Casey Jones, this is a problem with your reading comprehension because this was not an on-field comparison of Shedeur Sanders and Aaron Rodgers. No, that was not it at all. And maybe you did not click and read what Sam wrote. Maybe you just saw the headline in the caption on the article post and said, oh, he's comparing Aaron Rodgers to Shedeur Sanders, because you were wrong. And that is silly because that is not what Sam did. What Sam did is actually pretty interesting because it was in the same Mel Kiper first draft conversation of the 2004 NFL draft and the 2005 NFL draft were similar to last year's NFL draft and this year's NFL draft at quarterback. You had a lot of quarterbacks go in the first round in 2004. And then in 2005, you had two quarterbacks that were kind of like, I don't really know. Alex Smith at Utah, not the biggest program, not sure how he translates. And then you had Aaron Rodgers at Cal, not sure how he translates. One's going to go number one, and then what happens to the other? And Aaron Rodgers dropped. So what Sam compared, if you go read it, Casey, is that he compared the draft night situation to Shedeur Sanders and Aaron Rodgers. Could Shedeur Sanders, if Cam Ward goes early, and what if a couple teams pass on Shedeur? How far does Shedeur drop? And that was the comp that Sam was making. So not comparing Aaron Rodgers and Shedeur Sanders on the field. That's ridiculous. So do your reading before you call out people. That's my shade. So Ryan, do you have shade?
Yeah, I was actually funny when I was scanning the chat for some shade that people were kind of talking about. I agree 100%. This was actually going to be mine from Ashley Hetty Smith, who said shade on taxes. That's it. That's the shade. Because Austin, we actually had to make a transition this year. We had kind of our system of who handles our taxes every single year. And this year was a change that we had to make. And we have to now go through a different person to do our taxes. And you know how that is, man. Not only is it just your work tax forms, it's also daycare. It's all this miscellaneous stuff that you have to try to figure out, past student loans, payments, all that type of stuff, man. So taxes. And I'm also a father of two. So I would love to just be able to dedicate a day to just handling all my tax stuff. But like this pops up, this girl is having diarrhea. Sorry for too much information there. Like it's just so much stuff that pops up as a parent of two, man. And I'm just like, taxes, bro. I still have to finish these dang taxes.
Oh man, that's taxes are tough. Taxes are tough for everybody. All right. Eric says shade on me for wanting to skip on these QBs and give Levis another shot. That's a fair shade on yourself. Let's see. Rashid says throwing shade at my company, making all independent contractors sell back chip route, and making us rebuy after paying it off. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but that's okay. I'm sure it's valid shade overall. Let's see, more shade. I'm trying to scroll through here.
We have Jason Martinez that had said throwing shade at the trade back camp. They say that these are quarterbacks worth the number 1 pick and expect another team to sell the farm to trade another for one. Make it make sense. I thought was a very interesting one as we continue to have this conversation. We also had Jeff Rubel, who says throwing shade on Notre Dame reporter Timmy Hyde, saying Ohio State is the JUCO academically, just a hater because Notre Dame lost to Ohio State again. There's a lot of hatred, Austin, between Notre Dame and Ohio State. That's becoming a little bit of I wouldn't call it a budding rivalry because Notre Dame has to win one of these games sometime soon against Ohio State. They've lost the last 3, obviously, in the recency of this conversation, but very hatred going between.
So I'm guessing as you are in the Notre Dame space, you know who the reporter is, and you know the reference. I'm sure.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, because everything makes its round on Twitter nowadays, right? Like, there's nothing out in the media space that doesn't find its way to X or to Twitter nowadays. So yes, we have those types of conversations all the time, and there's a constant conversation about like academics and in comparison to recruiting and who can get in, who can't, and all those types of conversations around Notre Dame football, obviously. So fun time.
All right, that'll do it for us because Brian Callahan is about to speak at the NFL Combine. So stay tuned to all of our social media, especially Twitter at A to Z Sports and beyond. I know Brian Callahan, I'm sure, will be asked about where the Titans are currently with the number 1 overall draft pick evaluation. So we will have an update there on the website as quick as we possibly can for that. But before you head out of here, like the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and leave us a 5-star Google review. We'll be back tomorrow. More content coming from the NFL Combine throughout the day and throughout the entire week. Appreciate Ryan for stepping in, and we'll catch you guys later on. Appreciate it as always.